And we want to show you one of those locations. We're going to go to meteorologist Mike Seidel. He is in Garrett, Kentucky. Mike, describe the scene. What did you see when you first got there?
Hey, good morning, Jenny Reynolds. We were driving towards Hazard on 80, US 80. We're about 40 miles from Hazard, and I looked left and I told Randy, my producer, pull over. This whole town community of about 1,300 is underwater. This is the Beaver Creek, the right fork that goes through town. And I want to bring in a long-time resident. She's been here since 1966. We've got Deborah Reffert. We appreciate you joining us this morning. And what can you tell us about the water? Have you ever seen it this high?
I've never seen it this high. I think in the 70s it might have gotten across Old 80 down there. It's a great little community. It's very spirit-filled. A lot of families, it's generational. Several generations here have grown up here, and it's just sad. It's just sad to imagine the devastation and just the loss. You know.
Well, the creek is normally about 3 feet deep, and it's way over there. It's just amazing. And what we continue to see, Deborah, is items. We saw a propane tank. Now we've got someone's chest of drawers coming down the creek.
Exactly. Several high water rescues as well. Our little Garrett Fire Department is just awesome. They're doing a great job, and I know it's hard for everybody because everybody has a connection.
Right.
Yeah. I lost my dad today. I just left hospice.
You told me that, and we send our condolences.
So, but the roads are really bad. They're impassable in a lot of places. So I would suggest people stay off the roads unless you need to travel. I'm just trying to get home.
And where is your home right now?
I'm about 7 miles. I'm in the little town of Hippo, Kentucky.
Do you know anything about your situation there?
I do not. I would assume that it's over our road. I would assume that our hauler has covered, the road is covered. I don't think I'll be able to get in. Then we worry about slips coming off the hill, too, from the dirt and the debris.
Yeah, mudslides.
Mudslides, yeah.
We can show the folks how deep the water is, assuming that basketball goal is official. You said this is a parking lot right here.
Right. We've got Front Street and Back Street.
And you can see the water is almost up to the goal. We're about a little over 9 feet. Again, assuming that's official. And over on the other side, you can see officials, the flashing lights. That's where they're bringing the boats in on the water rescue. We've seen, just the 20 minutes we've been here, we've seen 4 or 5 water rescues, 6 or 7 folks.
Correct. And a little baby. A little baby was in there.
And some dogs. But we have no idea. We haven't been able to talk to officials if there was anybody unaccounted for at this point.
Not that I've heard of, but that, remains to be seen. People don't like to leave their houses. People, kind of, and it comes up really fast. I know years ago we would have to set up our furniture, and my parents would sit in the house and set up the furniture on sawhorses as the neighbors would come, and it would just be a watch party, if you will. So, yeah, you got to wonder how many people are in there, but it looks like we're blessed with a lot of people helping out.
Okay, Deborah Reffert, we appreciate it. And again, we are very sorry for the loss of your dad.
Thank you.
You even said you didn't really start crying until
I saw Garrett, right?
Saw Garrett in the creek.
It was such a part of my upbringing. I'm blessed. So.
Okay, let's go back to the Weather Channel right now. We have a tornado warning.
Yeah, I mean, what a day, right, Mike? From a flash flood emergency to a tornado warning.
Hey, let's go check out Mike Seidel. You mentioned he was in Garrett, Kentucky, Jen, and the scene he had was, again, just daunting, to say the very least, Mike.
Yeah, very small town, about 1,300. There are rescuing folks who have been caught with that water coming up from Beaver Creek. This is the right fork. The left fork is over on the other side of this mountain. So we're dealing with the right fork, and I can tell you the creek is normally about maybe 12 to 15 feet wide and 3 feet deep. And the creek is typically way, way over there, over to my right at the foot of that hill over there behind these houses. That's where the creek usually resides. Baseball complex in the distance is completely underwater. And this is Back Street. They've got Front Street and Back Street. Front Street is not underwater. This is Back Street. There's a jet ski. The gentleman on a jet ski has been up and down. And we've seen about half a dozen water rescues, people coming up in the boat. We had a baby. We had at least one dog coming up and being dropped off over here on Front Street where the emergency officials are, and the Garrett Fire Department are helping out with this situation. No word on if anybody's missing. It is a very small community, and you can see some of the houses are high up on this hill, mountainside, and they're not in any threat of being hit by the water. We were told by the locals the only time they know of in recent memory that the water's been higher, it went over Front Street down there, was in the late 1970s. So we're talking 45 plus years ago. So Jen and Reynolds, this is a situation being repeated all over this part of Kentucky after upwards of 6+ inches of rain fell last night into this morning. Right now, no imminent threat of any more rain, some breaks in the overcast, but the water has not started receding. Right now, it looks like it's up to about 9 feet. There's the basketball goal. That's our early way to measure it at this point, assuming that's official at 10 feet. That's the creek that is way, way over its banks, and the flood watch continues. There is more rain in the forecast.
So let's go to meteorologist Mike Seidel, who is there. Mike, you were in West Virginia. You were traveling to Hazard, where we knew there was a flash flood emergency last night. But then you stopped and you saw the community of Garrett was flooded.
Yeah, I looked left and we pulled over, and here we are in Garrett. This is the back of the community. In fact, Back Street is on the other side of those homes. We've moved down US 80 a bit. We're about 40 miles from Hazard, and this is the right fork of Beaver Creek. The creek usually flows under the bridge. See the bridge over there? There's a lot of debris on the up creek side that has been caught by the bridge. But look at all the water. This whole area is underwater. The whole town is underwater, the highest they've seen since the late 1970s. And to give you an idea of how deep it is, over there we had the water up near the top of a basketball goal, which officially is 10 feet. But look at this ball field, this diamond. Look at the dugouts and the field. So it's at least 7-8 feet deep on this ball field. So normally this is all dry ground. But the creek, and you get 6 to 8 inches of rain, and it is all coming down through the town of Garrett. It's about 1,300 folks. We've seen about a half a dozen water rescues. As far as we know, nobody's missing, but we don't have any official word. We have talked to some locals who have been talking to some folks who are still in their homes. One lady is in her home. She's got a 2-story home. She said the water is now on her first floor, but she's going to stay there for now. We can't tell if the water is coming up anymore or not. If it is, it's not coming up dramatically, just based on the markers I've been looking at on the creek. So this is being repeated all over this part of Kentucky. The issue here again, heavy rain, but also knows the hills and mountains. You've got gravity and elevation, and that elevation with the gravity, the water comes down the hill. As we talked to one of the locals earlier, they're concerned about slippage, meaning mud, parts of these hills coming down on houses and roads, something you think about maybe in California or out west in the Rockies, but not here in Kentucky. But that's what happens when you have this kind of rain. Fortunately, we're getting a break in the rain right now. There's still a risk of more showers and thunderstorms through tomorrow, and then hopefully we dry out a little bit for the weekend. But we've got to get this water down. But as far as we know, everybody that has been able to get a hold of the fire department, they brought them out in a boat. So that's the latest here. Reynolds and Jen from Garrett, Kentucky. Like I said, it's about 45 minutes northeast of Hazard.
And I just had one quick question for you. How were people rescued? You'd mentioned someone out there on jet skis. Did they bring boats in? Did they have to get on their roofs?
No. As far as I know, they were taken out of their first floors because the water, if you can see the backs of these houses, the water is in the first floor, but it's not up to the windows. So I suspect that they were out on their porch and they were grabbed off the porch. Nobody up on a roof. Some of these houses actually are built up and don't have any water in their first floors. I mean, that's keen thinking, considering the water hasn't been this high in about 45 years. But no idea of anybody being rescued from their roofs. All we saw were boats picking up people down Back Street and bringing them up to Front Street and dropping them off on higher ground. So as far as we know, we'll keep our fingers crossed in this area. Hopefully nobody's lost any loved ones in this small town, this small community on US 80.
Unbelievable. Yeah, so this is breaking a record that was set back in 1957.
Well, the next one we're about to talk about, that's in Garrett, Kentucky. Mike, we want to show everyone, thank you for that. We want to show everyone these have been really hard hit. And Mike, is it the whole community? Give us some perspective on how much of the town is flooded.
Well, the downtown area, I call the downtown, it's a very small community here in Floyd County in southeast Kentucky. And we'll give you a bird's eye view. There's 2 main streets. There's Back Street and there's Front Street. We also have homes up on the hillside, on the mountainside. They're well above the water. But this is the right fork of Beaver Creek. Locals say it hasn't been this high since the late 1970s. Back then, the creek actually went over Front Street. That's where they've been bringing folks in on boats. We'll take you back about 45 minutes ago. We've seen about 5 or 6 water rescues coming up Back Street, making the right turn and heading to higher ground over there on Front Street. Have not heard of any unaccounted for people. The fact that we haven't seen the boats for about 30 minutes tells me that everybody that wants to get out has gotten out. We did see a lady just a moment ago, about 4 or 5 houses down. She was out on her porch. Now that house, like the house here in the foreground, has blocks under it. So it's up above. Well, a lot of these houses have water on their first floor. So like this house in the foreground, as you can see, water has not gotten up to the deck and into the first floor. And we're following the water level here on this basketball goal. It has come up a little bit in the past hour and a half. It's still not at the top of the rim, which, if it is official here in this parking lot, would be at 10 feet. So it's the Beaver Creek over its banks, all that rainfall last night and this morning. There's no current flash flood warnings, I think, in the whole state of Kentucky. They've been lifted, but the memory lingers, and there's more rain in the forecast. The flood watch continues. A little light shower right now moving through, but that's about it. So as far as we know, so far, it's all good news here in the town of Garrett, Kentucky. Jen and Reynolds, we keep our fingers crossed and hope that everybody's okay, and the folks that wanted to get out, as far as we know, have gotten out from this small community.
Yeah. No, Mike Seidel, thank you. Thank you for being there. This is a widespread issue. It's not from community to community, but within them, right? So you can get in between, but then all the flooding's happening into these valleys. Mike Seidel, thank you.
Once again, we're back live here in Garrett, Kentucky, in southeastern Kentucky, where there were flash flood emergencies overnight and this morning. All the warnings have been lifted. There is more rain in the forecast, and this is what you see in this small community of about 1,300 folks. That's the bridge over the right fork of Beaver Creek, where you can see the Beaver Creek went way over its banks. There have been water rescues. We can show you those. Not a lot of water rescues since we got in here, and we haven't seen the boat go in and back out in about 30 minutes. We saw maybe about 6, 7, 8 people being brought out to drier ground, along with some pets and even a baby. But that's the back of Back Street. Some of the homes are up on blocks, and we actually saw a resident out on their porch. But most of the homes now, as you can see, have water in the first floor of their homes, as the creek is just so far over its banks. Get a load of this. It's about 100 yards from home plate to the bridge. And we've got this baseball field. You can see the dugout over there. Top of the dugout, what's that going to be, about 8 feet. So we're dealing with 8 to 10 feet of water. No signs of it's going down, although we haven't had any significant rain in quite a while, and we're going to be dry for at least the next few hours, except for this light rain shower going on right now. So this is the scene all over southeastern and southern Kentucky, where we had upwards of 6 to 8 plus inches of rain overnight. And this is what happens. That's one of the trucks coming down the bridge here. The locals told me that the water hasn't been this high, as far as they know, since the late 1970s. So we're talking about 45 years since the water came up this high. They've rescued folks. No reports of anybody missing or unaccounted for, as far as we know. We'll keep our fingers crossed here in Garrett, Kentucky. So Reynolds and Jen, just a scene that you hate to see, but when you get that much water, and remember, we have these mountains and hillsides, so the water drains down because of gravity with the elevation, and locals are concerned about slippage on the hillsides, meaning some of the hillsides, i.e. a mudslide or a bit of a landslide, would come down into a community or one of these roadways. So it's still not a great situation out here. We hope to get some drier air in here by Saturday and Sunday to cut down for the threat of heavy rain and get this water backed off. But unlike in most flash floods, this water has come up, but it's not going down very fast at this point.
Mike, we've had the opportunity to speak to a variety of people this morning, and one common refrain was how difficult it has been for people to get from one part of the community or the region to the other. How difficult was your drive when your crew reestablished, when you went from one part of the area to your present location?
While we were on the main highway coming out of Huntington off I-64, we took US 23 to Highway 80, and the whole way it's been 4 lanes, no water anywhere near the roadway. In fact, we were coming through here, and I looked left and told my producer, Randy Flinders, pull over. Look at this. Figured out Garrett is underwater. But the drive on these main highways are fine. It's the back roads, the 2-lane roads through the mountainous terrain here in eastern and southeastern Kentucky. That's the concern. And also, earlier we had roads underwater. I would assume some of that water has backed off, unlike here in Garrett right now.
Right, and because you have had some breaks in the rainfall. Mike, you know, the other concern that we've heard from the people that we've talked to is getting in touch with loved ones, either from cell phone issues or other internet challenges. Have you had any problems with your cell phone coverage or with the internet?
No, in fact, we're broadcasting what we call live view, and that uses 6 cell phone cards. So we're getting our signal out here in Garrett. Self-service is working fine here, but we've heard other instances when you get off the main highway back in the rural areas that self-service is spotty on a normal day and in some cases not working at all. Plus we have, last time I looked, you can update me, there was about 20,000 folks without power in this part of Kentucky. So it's not a good situation. We got to get the water down, we got to get the rain out of here, but unfortunately there is more rain in the forecast for the next, at least through tonight and into Friday.
My goodness, what a story. Okay, Mike, again, thanks so much for that report.
And our meteorologist Mike Seidel is joining us live from Garrett with a closer look. Mike, tell us how all this unfolded today.
Well, overnight last night, the rain moved in here before midnight. Then it rained very hard all night. We're talking upwards of 6 to 10 inches across a wide area of southeast Kentucky. Here in Garrett, this is a small community of about 1,300 people. The water has come down significantly since early this afternoon. There's the water line on the side of the building. You can see the dark concrete, those blocks. It's come down about 3 feet. Earlier, we saw the water up almost to the top of a basketball goal, so it was up over 9 feet earlier. This is the right fork of the Beaver Creek, and the thing about this is normally it's very quiet. It's maybe 15 feet wide, 2 or 3 feet deep. In fact, it goes under that one-lane blue bridge in the distance. So you get a sense of how much water is still left around. This is the highest the water's been here since 1977. Earlier today, they did some water rescues from some of the residents here in town. Some stayed in their houses because they have 2 stories and they're up on cinder blocks. But many homes were flooded in the first floor. They weren't plucked off roofs here, but they were taken up here to higher ground into safety. We talked to some of the guys and gals who did the water rescues. They're estimating that they pulled out about 30 folks. So we just were with a crew that went back into the rural area to pick up a mom and 3 kids on this creek, and that's so well up the creek here from the areas here around Garrett. Forecast is for more showers and thunderstorms at least through tomorrow night. The flood watch goes till 8 p.m. and we could see another 1 to 2 inches of rain on top of what we've seen. There could be higher totals again. You got to really keep an eye on the radar, Jackie. It's more of a short-term nowcast as we've seen in St. Louis and last night. I mean, it started training and then it just didn't stop. And again, we saw what was going on. By 1 or 2 o'clock, it was obvious that this was going to be a very serious situation. But again, highest water they've seen in 45 years here in the Beaver Creek.
Just unbelievable. It's hard to believe we've been dealing with this day after day, and there's still more to come. Eastern Kentucky with the topography there.
That's the FEMA director, Deanne Criswell. She is going to be heading up this way tomorrow, she said, talking to the governor today. We'll likely meet with the governor, Governor Beshear, tomorrow. We talked to him earlier, and he talked about what he saw and what he thinks is happening. We've got climate change. We've had some of the worst flooding on record here in the state of Kentucky.
Later today, and we have this in the notes, we'll be launching a Team Eastern Kentucky Flooding Relief Fund. These families are going to need help, much like our families in Western Kentucky. They are also going through one of the worst disasters of this type that we have seen.
And back here in Garrett, we have some good news. We haven't had any rain really since this morning, and the water level keeps dropping. In fact, it looks like it's gone down about another 6 inches since we talked to you about 20 minutes ago. So the water is dropping here on Beaver Creek, the right fork of Beaver Creek. Highest they've seen this creek since 1977, 45 years ago. Now the question is, how much more rain do we get in the next day or so? The flood watch here goes until tomorrow night at 10 p.m. It may rain over the weekend, but the concern right now is tonight and tomorrow. We already see thunderstorms moving into western Kentucky. We've got action in Tennessee. We'll just have to see how everything gels overnight, because the last thing this area needs is any more heavy rainfall. And certainly the thunderstorms, Jackie, that trained over this area, much like in St. Louis earlier in this week. It did it here from just before midnight last night through early this morning. Chris?
All right, thanks for the update there, Mike. You know, not far from you, about 30
Welcome back to Garrett, Kentucky. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel. This entire part of the state of Kentucky, southeast and south central, hit hard last night. Training thunderstorms, storms over the same area. Hour after hour, we had rainfall totals as much as a foot. And here in Garrett, the highest water level they've seen on Beaver Creek, the right fork of Beaver Creek, in 45 years. But good news now, the water has come down, looks like about 4 feet. It keeps coming down. That's a good thing. What we don't need to see is any more heavy rain tonight and tomorrow, because that could bring the creek back up. But right now, it is going in the right direction. These two gentlemen here have been nice enough to volunteer their services. They've been out on the creek today. They put out twice, and they brought back 4 residents to safety. Earlier, we talked to some of the other rescue efforts, and they said they rescued about 30 folks, not off the roof of their homes, but generally off the first floor. A lot of these houses had water going into their first floor. Now the water is receded, but they've got to come back in. Jackie, once again, it's all about remediation, mold and mildew, pulling out carpet, and hoping that they don't get any more rain, any more heavy rain tonight, tomorrow, and into Saturday.
It looks like that is a possibility, though, Mike. So we want to talk a little bit more going forward of what these people can expect. Now, our meteorologist, Mike Seidel, is joining us live from Garrett with a closer look. Mike, I'm unfamiliar with where Garrett is exactly. Are you near Hazard, or where exactly is this?
Yeah, we're not far from Hazard. We're about 35 or 40 miles northeast of Hazard. And we are out here on Beaver Creek. This is the right fork of Beaver Creek, and you can still see that all these homes and this vehicle surrounded by water. But what we've noticed, look on that wall over there, you can see how much the water has come down, about 4 feet. So we're making great progress. Earlier, we saw a basketball goal. We're talking late this morning, and the water in the parking lot about 100 yards away was about 9.5 feet deep. So that's what we're looking at, improvement, because the rain stopped. The heavy rain stopped earlier this morning. We've had a few showers, but we're looking good in the short term for this evening here in Garrett. What the locals are telling us is this is the worst flooding they've seen since 1977, and they had to rescue about 30 people this morning. Most of them were on their porches. Nobody was up on the roof. You can see the water has receded, but water got into, well, it looks like this house is okay as far as the first floor because they're built up. This house didn't fare so well. It certainly got up into the siding and certainly could have gotten into the house. Once you get water in the house, boy, it's a big issue. Mold, mildew, the carpet has to come out, the hardwood has to come out. I was somewhere a few years ago and they just gave up and they just put in a stone floor and bricked up the walls. So if they had any more flooding, they wouldn't have to deal with remediation. We're going to keep going up the creek here. The creek normally is over here behind these houses and it's about, 10, 12 feet wide and 2 or 3 feet deep. So it has really overrun its banks. This is what happens when you have training thunderstorms. This is in Floyd County, and as far as we know, in this community of about 1,300, there were no fatalities, and as far as we know, everybody is accounted for. They're still doing some water rescues up the creek. We talked to some gentlemen earlier, and they got word from dispatch because they didn't have cell service, mainly because this is a very rural area, that there was a mom with 3 kids that needed to be saved. But notice the water, pretty good flow of water through here, but it is coming down, and everybody here, I think, has left their homes. We did see some people earlier today that stayed, but they may be in their houses. The ones that had, they were up on blocks and also had a second floor. So, Jackie, right now, we're going in the right direction. The water here on the creek is going down and going down pretty quickly, and hopefully by morning the water will be gone, and then it's just the cleanup that we have to worry about.
Mike, you just ran into something, buddy. What just happened there?
The boat hit a fence. We're okay. The current's kind of strong, and we just hit this fence a little bit. We're okay.
So are you in the street, basically? Are you in what's normally the street?
Yeah, this is normally back street. The water here is about 2.5 feet deep. So it's come down from about 7 or 8 feet. So, yeah, we're okay. We drifted into that metal fence here. And we're just keeping an eye on the water. Going down, we're just hoping that we don't get any more training thunderstorms here tonight, tomorrow, into Saturday. The flood watch continues right now until 10 p.m. tomorrow night.
Mike, where are you in relation to the creek? Do you know? So you're in a street right now.
The creek, I don't know. Can you turn the camera around, Joshua? The creek is way back there by about 100 yards. If you can see between the houses, that's where the creek is. And as I said, it normally is about 15 feet wide and maybe a couple of feet deep. So it is way, way over its banks here in Garrett. And as I mentioned earlier, the highest they've seen this water since 1977. So that's
a long time.
Says something. Almost
Yeah,
50,
it really
45
does.
years ago. Says something.
So talk to us about the topography and the terrain all surrounding you. We can see the beautiful mountainsides and the hillsides. This
Right.
is all contributing to why this flooded.
Yeah, you can see the mountainsides and hillsides. What happens is it's simply gravity. Water runs down the hill. In fact, on our drive here to Hazard and back, we saw a lot of locations where they did have some slippage, some minor mudslide into the edge of the road. A lot of that on the side of the road. Nothing that closed the road, nothing as serious as we've seen before in, let's say, California, Southern California, in the winter during the rainy season, but certainly issues with rocks and muds coming down the sides. We talked to a lady earlier who was concerned about slippage because these hillsides and mountainsides are very saturated. If you remember how much rain they've had recently. Up in Charleston, Charleston's had over 13 inches of rain just through yesterday since June 1st. So it's very saturated, and it doesn't take much to get some of the hillsides to come down again, purely a function of gravity and how moist and loose that soil is.
Yeah, just incredible when we think about how much rain has fallen. In fact, I was looking at some of the Doppler radar estimates which were up over 12 inches in some areas, and it's possible that we may end up with a state record in Kentucky if some of those numbers verify. I know Dr. Knabb is with us here as well, and Chris Bruin, they want to join the conversation and talk to you a little bit more about all of this unfolding where you are.
Yeah, Mike, I'm curious, as you have a sense, if you look to other recent events like in Buchanan County, Virginia, and then Waverly, Tennessee, where a lot of the water that went through those towns rushed in from a few miles away. So it was about the water, not just that fell in the town, but that fell in the region. Do you have a sense for how much of the water that rushed through town came from elsewhere, maybe miles away?
I would think that's got to be the case because the creek is very small, and I mean it's way hundreds of yards outside its banks. So you got to figure that this came from a distance, came down the mountainsides, hillsides, and it's funneled down into this town right off Highway 80.
You know, Mike, how quickly do you think this happened? Was it one of those, minutes it went from dry to now we got to get out of our house? I mean, have you talked to any residents on how quickly this unfolded?
They had time to get out. They knew as long as they were awake, they had time to get out. It took about 3 or 4 hours for this water to come up this high. So it wasn't one of these deals where it came up rapidly, like we've seen in Ellicott City, Maryland, and some other areas. 3 or 4 hours of rain from 11 o'clock, and then by 3 or 4 in the morning, we had the flash flood emergency, and that's where we had 6 inches of rain in 3 to 4 hours in some of these locations. So they had time to get out. Some, I think, may have slept through it, and they woke up and found water coming up. It was still coming up at daylight, and then it came into the first floor, and that's when the local emergency rescue folks jumped into action and rescued the folks and got them out of their houses. Although, as you can see, everything is fine. We don't have any, none of the water got into the second floor. And as I mentioned, a house like this, it's built up on cinder blocks, although the water, you can see, is going down over 4 feet now. The living part of the house is stayed dry. It's the underneath where they have a boat there and maybe they park a car sometimes.
And so is the water moving pretty quickly, and are you seeing a lot of debris, Mike? You know, since we saw your boat kind of getting bumped there, as I'm looking at the fence, you can see a lot of junk, basically, and debris kind of getting collected up in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of debris against the fence now. This morning we saw a propane tank, we saw a chest of drawers, we saw other furniture, we saw a U-Haul van floating downstream. The 2 hours we've been here this afternoon, we've not seen any large objects. Partly because the ones that were going to float have already floated by, and secondly, the water has come down.
So I think it's a good, we can all talk about this, you know. I think flooding is on the forefront of most people's minds, just given what happened in St. Louis and what's happened again in eastern Kentucky overnight. It's a very good possibility another community could be in a similar situation tonight. So even before, have your plan before going to bed tonight, especially since a lot of this is going to happen after dark tonight.
Yeah, and plus I also wonder about, people are going to want to get back into their communities as waters recede, but what if more rain comes, they're right back into the threat. So how do you balance, the periods where it's not raining and the water's coming down with the fact that more rain could be coming, Mike?
Well, a lot of folks here concerned. We had lunch and the waitress said, yeah, they said it's going to rain starting tonight for 2 or 3 more days. And I tempered the forecast that, yes, it may rain the next 2 or 3 days, but the odds of another situation like last night setting up in the same area, it's not a slam dunk, as you mentioned, Dr. Nab. You're not going to bet on it. But once again, people had to get pulled out of their houses this morning. Here you can see some of the video. This is about 10:30 this morning. A couple here, 2 or 3 here. We had a baby come out with their parents and also a pet, a dog.
Yeah, this truly has been just an incredible week when it comes to flooding. You know, we've had 2 big events, the 1 in 1,000 year flood, which is really just a probability of a very small fraction of a chance of a flood like this to happen in any given year. But here we've had 2 of them in a week, one in a major metropolitan area, another in eastern and more rural parts of Kentucky. As we're looking at some of these images of the damage and the flooding devastation, we'll continue to follow this on Storm Center.